but we're really interested in getting the recording. I figured it's probably just nicest to say a little bit about what we all do very briefly, but I'm going to introduce Melanie, our speaker, to start with, and then we'll just go from there if that works for everybody.
Sure. Thank
That's
you.
good.
Shall I go?
Over to yes, go Mel. Perfect.
Thank you. So my name is Mel Francis. I'm delighted to be with you all today. I am an HR professional first and foremost. I've worked in HR all my life. I'm a fellow of the CIPD. I was this year named as one of HR's most influential practitioners, which was pretty amazing, by HR magazine. So I'm very chuffed with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, number 17 in the ranking. So which, well, it's just amazing. It's a real privilege for me to be named that. I am a neurodiversity specialist, so I specialise in neurodiversity in the workplace. So I work alongside a true neurodiversity guru by the name of Professor Amanda Kirby, who has worked in neurodiversity forever, and she is a medic and a neurodiversity expert, written 11 books, etc. And I get the privilege of fangirling and working alongside her, bringing my HR expertise together with her neurodiversity expertise, and we help organisations. That's my focus. She also does a lot of work with the justice setting. So she's just Do It have just won the contract for Do It Profiler, which is our neurodiversity screening tool to be rolled out in every prison in the UK. So that's just gone live this week, actually, which is great. And actually thinking for you, Keely and Paul, as apprenticeship providers, I can talk to you about our apprenticeship profiler as well separately. But
as soon as you said that as well, I did think about our workplace. We deal a lot with prisons as well. So it's really interesting that you said that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, let's have a bigger chat about the profiler, and I can
offline
definitely give you some more information about that, because it's a fantastic tool, as Jane, who's on the call, will be able to attest, I hope, as well. Hi, Jane. So I am here today to talk to you about neurodiversity and put that in the context of coaching, which is what Charlotte had asked me to come along and do with you. So very much a session where we can have conversation. I have got content to share with you, of course, but a conversation, answer any questions, and of course we can pick up afterwards if you wanted some more information as well.
Now, thank you ever so much for the introduction. We've had more people join us as you've been doing that. And for those of you that just joined, we're just doing a very brief, this is who I am, where I am, what I do, just so we've got a bit of a view of who's in the room today, so we can understand each other's background slightly. So no more than about 30 seconds, if that's all right. Otherwise, we'll erode into Mel's time. So Paul, would you go first? I'm just going to go through the screen, if that's all right.
Thank you very much. Paul Walker, Wiltshire. Is that it? Oh yeah. Currently work 1 day a week with a company called Get Set that looks after apprentices, but they also look after prisons and retraining adults. The other 4 days, I'm a freelance coach, and hence the reason I thought I'd come on this to understand a bit about neurodiversity. It's very big in the educational world, and certainly with apprentices, we have a lot of paperwork that deals with neurodiversity. So anything you can share, Melanie, much appreciated.
Perfect.
Thanks, Paul. Jane, nice to meet you, Jane. There we go.
Hi, sorry, I couldn't mute myself. Hi, I'm an ADHD coach, leadership coach, executive coach. I also co-founded the Inclusive Facilitation Exchange, and I'm a proud ADHD with autistic traits, and I identify as dyspraxic. And I've been on a personal journey, but also with my clients, and the way I approach being an ADHD coach is it's still a full person-centered, because of the whole co-occurrence and everything that comes with it. So I'm a lover of learning everything. So I have this call in at 3 o'clock on my diary, so I'm so sorry. I will have to hop off in about 5 minutes because I've got a client at 4:30, and I just want to sit and ground for that as well. So I'm so sorry.
No worries, Jane. Apologies, there'd been a mix-up on the time of the two systems. But there's a recording on this, so we'll make sure you get a copy of it, Jane, as well. Carol, hi.
Hello, good afternoon. So I'm a consultant doing, well, I've got three hats on. I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a learning and development consultant. Most of that at the moment is coaching, which is why this is just so important at the moment. And I'm also a carer for my parents. So I've got kind of three hats on. And actually I'm in the neurodiverse bucket as well as an ADHDer. So yeah, really looking forward to learning some nuggets of wisdom and sharing whatever I can share too. So thanks very much for putting this on.
Fabulous. Thanks, Carol. And hi, Chrissy. Lovely to see you.
Hi there. Yeah, so I used to be learning and development and coach. Well, I'm still coaching in my profession as well, but I'm also a psychotherapist and a couples therapist, and I specialize in neurodiversity with couples. So I've got a lot of neurodiverse couples. Some of them are attracted to each other and some are neurotypical stroke neurodiverse as well. And I have dyslexia, so I'm on that kind of end of the spectrum.
Thank you, Chrissy. Keely, hi Keely.
Hello, I know Paul's introduced us already. I'm just joining today just to listen in really. I teach level 5 apprenticeships to leadership and management, with a lot of them not being able to recognise their neurodiversity until they've really come on the apprenticeship, and I think it's really opened up a world for them again through profiling, and has just let them, you know, get to know themselves a little bit better. So just coming on here is just going to help me help them really.
That's amazing. Thanks, Keely. Thanks. Lovely to have you with us as well. And Hannah, nice to meet you as well.
Unmuting. Am I unmuted? There we go.
No, you're good. You're good.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I had a time mix up as well, so I have to dash off at 4:45. I thought we were tuning in for overseas or something. I was expecting lots of different accents in the chat. And so I'm the owner of Being and Beyond, which is a counselling, coaching and mentoring business. And I also work as a TV presenter, and I do coach mostly. I do present mostly wellbeing content, so anything to do with counselling, coaching and mentoring on television.
Amazing. Oh, fantastic. Lovely to meet you, Hannah. Well, I'm curious about that, so let's pick up on that.
I was doing it long before I trained as a counsellor, coach and mentor, and then it just quite nicely took those skills, and now I get asked to do most shows around the things that I work with. So yeah, this is, and I'm really interested in this topic as well, seeing obviously the growth in the awareness of this and coming through to the clients that I have signing up on a regular basis actually. So this is really come at really good timing, and I'd actually put it down as a note for more CPD in this subject. So really excited to have seen it come up in my mailbox yesterday.
Oh, brilliant. Fantastic. Well, thank you ever so much for joining. I'm Charlotte. I am the wife of an ADHD and a parent of a daughter with ADHD, a late diagnosis for my husband, very much so. So I come from a very much a learning as when I was doing my coaching qualification, I suddenly learned that why I couldn't understand my daughter so much as I thought I could. It was quite an interesting insight, and it's always been a passion of mine to make sure we promote this area of neurodiversity. But alongside that, I run two businesses. I run Elmer, my leadership training and development organisation and change and transformation business, and I also have Business Coach Directory, which is what we're here today under this umbrella. Business Coach Directory was set up initially to help coaches connect with clients back in the day when directories were very much of that ilk, and they still do have a hold place with regards to that. But my business is more than just a directory. It's about connecting individuals like ourselves. I've already heard some great connection potentially for today, educating and empower us to continue growing our business. And that my business is very much sits under these three pillars. And today we're very much in the learning and development, and you could say empower pillar, with regards to bringing great like-minded individuals together, but also non-like-minded individuals to help challenge us and grow our businesses accordingly, and the skills and the capabilities that we have within our own organisations or within other people's organisations. So that's the purpose of Business Coach Directory. And today, obviously, we have Mel as a speaker, and at the end of today's session, I will just summarise what we've got going on for the future with Business Coach Directory. But I'm going to hand straight over to Mel to take us through this brilliant content that she's kindly put together for us. So over to you, Mel.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I have about 3 days worth of content to share with you in the next 45 minutes. So apologies, but you will get a copy of the slides. Neurodiversity is something I've also lived with, like many of you have lived experience. I've lived with neurodiversity for the last 18 years in the form of my amazing son, who turned 18 on Sunday. How on earth have I got an 18-year-old? I don't know. But my journey, actually, sorry to use the J word so early in the call, but my journey started with a highly anxious son who was in year 5 at school. I'm a single mum, it's just the 2 of us in the house. And so this was all encompassing. You know, he was very anxious. So what do you do when your loved one is not well? You take him along to the doctor and say, hello, doctor, here's my son, please fix him. And the doctor said, okay, right, so we can refer you to CAMS, which is the Child Adolescent Mental Health Service, which some of you may have had some interaction with. Like any department of the NHS at the moment, massively oversubscribed, wait lists are long. CAMS said, yep, sure, we can see him in about 18 months. Is that okay? Like, not really, because he's my baby and I really want to get him better. So I was really lucky to be in a privileged position, and I use that word intentionally, to be able to find and afford a private child psychologist. Around the whole neurodiversity world, we've got a real socio-economic situation bubbling where, you know, accessibility, availability of services is really a postcode lottery in lots of ways and inaccessible to lots of people. We already touched briefly on the justice setting. You know, those that are at the edges of society, to use a broad term, sometimes find it really difficult to be getting services and support, and yet they're the ones that probably need it the most. I'll bring that to life a bit more as we're going through our session today. So I was able to find and afford a child psychologist, took him along for an appointment again, said, here's my anxious child, please fix him. And they said, initial assessment, absolutely off the scale on his anxiety. He also has OCD, which was not something I'd, you know, thought about. And I'm just going to touch on OCD briefly to say OCD is not, as I learned, about me putting my wardrobe in colour order or putting my spices in alphabetical order or, you know, not liking dust. OCD, you know, the obsession and the compulsion is overwhelming at times. And I think sometimes we can be very flippant about the term of, oh, I'm a bit OCD. And, you know, I'm very cautiously careful to help people to understand what that is and what it isn't. And we'll talk about mental health as we go through this a bit as well. But the other thing that the private child psychologist said was he also has traits of autism, which wasn't something I was expecting. It wasn't something I'd even ever thought about. You know, how come my baby, who's perfect in every way, I'm being told that he has traits that are, you know, from my understanding, you know, something bad. You know, we don't often talk about autism necessarily as being a good thing. And so, you know, I was concerned about that. And I was given options then to, you know, explore that through a formal diagnosis route, and I could go back through to CAMS, to the NHS. At the moment, the NHS wait lists vary. Again, this is where the postcodes kick in. So one of the ICBs, the NHS trusts that we're working with at Do It, have told us that their wait list is at 22 years. 22 years, because they've literally got no diagnosticians, and yet the referrals are coming in, they're coming in, they're coming in. According to a recent BBC research report, the average waitlist for ADHD diagnosis across the UK is about 8 years at the moment. So we've got a situation bubbling here. And what happens when there's space in the market? In come the people who can do your diagnosis, And, you know, it's kind of cowboy country out there at the moment, I'm afraid. In fact, I saw the other day, I could get a diagnosis through Groupon, which is quite an interesting one, obviously high quality. So, you know, it's a real worry as to what's going on. Actually, I now I know what I know. I wouldn't pursue a diagnosis because I don't feel like it really gave me anything more in relation to his diagnosis than the Do It profiler, which I mentioned earlier, and I will mention again as we go through the call, which is a neurodiversity screening tool that was created by Professor Kirby and screens for all 6 of the conditions. And actually the report gave me far more information than the diagnostic report that I got from the child psychologist. The children's profiler cost £25. The cost of the private diagnosis was not £25, as you can imagine. So in all of the diagnoses for neurodiversity, actually, the only one where I feel that some form of NHS diagnosis is required is for ADHD, where medication might be needed. The others, unlikely that you're going to need any further, whether you're going to get any further support or information, actually. So anyway, that was my journey. And what I'm showing you here is the lovely cartoon. So I've worked in HR all my life, and I've had some pretty difficult conversations, I have to say. This one, which was the one where I'm going to have to tell my son that he's been diagnosed with autism, was probably one of the most difficult from my perspective. So I asked her to help me with preparing for that. What can I show him? What can I give him? This was a lovely little cartoon, which I'll send you the link to. It's called Understanding the Spectrum. And in this cartoon, this character describes what autism is. And this picture is the autism spectrum. Now, I was always of the understanding that the spectrum was linear and was going from not autistic to very autistic. And I was kind of looking at where on that line do I put my son. But actually, as you can see here, it's far more amazing than that, actually, and has all of these areas where the diagnostician is looking to map where the individual sits on each of these particular elements. So when someone says, oh, we're all on the spectrum, we are absolutely all on the spectrum. And I know that can be a really kind of, controversial statement, but I can wholeheartedly say we are absolutely all somewhere on here. But what we're not all doing is reaching the threshold to be diagnosed with, in this case, autism or another neurodiverse condition. What we look for in the diagnoses are the spiky profiles. So we're looking for the extreme challenges for diagnosis, but actually what we should also be looking for are the extreme strengths. Diagnoses are very much based on a deficit model. So are you bad enough to be diagnosed with this particular condition? Not where are your areas of brilliance? And let's have a look at those too. And the Do It profiler looks at both of our our challenges and our strengths, because that's really important. So today you've asked me to talk about what neurodiversity means in the coaching context. And I wanted to start by talking about what is neurodiversity. Now, this is probably, a 3-year degree, probably 7-year PhD, etc. I'm going to do it in a sentence that says that neurodiversity is about the fact that our neuros are diverse. Our brains are different. The end. And that really is as complicated as we need for this to be. Going to that person-centered, which is what you guys are doing all the time in your coaching conversations. Who is this person? What do I need to know about them? How can I help them to think about navigating this crazy world that we live in, right? So, and neurodiversity is that. Neuros are diverse. And that's not really a surprise when we think about our brains are made up of billions of neuros connected in billions of different ways. Any mathematicians amongst you can do billions by billions by billions and realize that it means that no two brains are the same. We are all beautifully, magnificently unique. What we know from some research, what we think from some research, and I'm not here to, I don't think I'm qualified enough to debate it yet, but the research tells us that around 80% of us have brains that work in very similar ways, and we call that neurotypical. So the world is very neurotypical. You know, it assumes that we're able to navigate the world, we're able to get ourselves from A to B on time, using transport, following timetables, sticking to, you know, understanding what we're hearing, processing, communicating, etc. And of course, we know that we don't all do that in the same way, but the world assumes we do. So there's our 80% in the neurotypical hump of the bell curve. 20% of us, though, so that's 1 in 5 of us, diverges from that neurotypical hump. And that means strengths and challenges that are diverging from the what society might consider normal. So I've just got a short video to show you to bring this to life for us a bit. This is just 2.5 minutes. I'm going to send you the link to this, but hopefully this will give you a bit more context of the way in which I talk about neurodiversity. So as I said, I hope that brings to life a bit more about how I like to think about neurodiversity. I very rarely, in fact, I don't run sessions that are condition specific. I know at the moment we're in October, which is Everything Awareness Month. So I've got ADHD Awareness Month, Dyslexia Awareness Month, etc. I don't talk about any one condition in isolation because our brains are so beautifully complex, and we know that crossover of traits and conditions is the rule rather than the exception. I'll bring that to life for you a bit. But just to pick up on a bit of this language, so we're all neurodiverse. Group of brains is neurodiverse. One brain might be neurodivergent because it's diverging away from the neurotypical, which is our hump of the bell curve. The language around neurodiversity is ever evolving. So neurospicy is something that I'm hearing quite a bit now. I had Neurosparkly, that was a new one a couple of weeks ago. And you know, the ways in which individuals choose to identify is really personal and really important, as you all know as coaches, that we take the time to understand how people prefer to be described, how they're describing themselves, some first person or third person. I'm an ADHD, or I'm an ADHD. That's another one that's coming up quite commonly now at the moment. The kind of diagnoses that we're seeing an increase in are autism and ADHD together. So ADHD is something that was coming through quite a lot. So again, as you are very well aware as professional coaches, that personal identification is really key. Now, the important thing, as I alluded to earlier, you know, the diagnoses are, so there are two kind of manuals that have been created, the DSM, which is the diagnostic manual, and another one by the World Health Organization. So these really are the only two official ways that diagnosticians can diagnose. So they should all be following the same prescriptive way of diagnosing, of identifying whether somebody meets the criteria to be diagnosed. But actually what happens is it depends who you see and the day on which you see them. So the label that we have or that we're given might depend on the door that we've gone through now or in the past. You know, if we were having this conversation 10 years ago, dyslexia was the diagnosis that people were receiving. As I said, autism and ADHD tend to be the diagnoses that are increasingly being received, but neurodiversity is not just those conditions. Brace yourselves for a crazy diagram. I'm going to send this to you. Please don't worry. But I just wanted to put this on here because this is Professor Kirby's, we call this her neurodiversity map. So what we're doing here is showing there's 6 main neurodiverse conditions. These are all the ones that the Do It profiler screens for. These are in the coloured balls, the coloured bits, so the 6 conditions. Around the outside, though, in some of the blue circles, semicircles, I'm going to send you all the abbreviations as well. These are some of the other conditions that sit under the neurodiversity umbrella. Neurodiversity is a phrase that was coined by, well, actually, there's a bit of a bum fight over who coined it between two, but I'm going with Judy Singer, who was an Australian sociologist who, when she was doing her PhD, recognised that these conditions were with the brain at the core. And, you know, this is just about the brain behaving in different ways. And so she coined the phrase neurodiversity and rightly argues that the world needs neurodiversity in order to survive and thrive, in the same way that it needs biodiversity to be able to survive and thrive. And actually, if you think about it, these traits would have been evolved out if they were not useful to us in society. And of course, they are, right? If we all had the same brain, then we wouldn't really be getting a lot done. So these conditions are, I'm just going to walk you around this quickly. Developmental language disorder, which is a neurodiverse condition, which is where we look at difficulties with things like speaking, understanding, social interaction, processing information. Dyslexia, which, you know, people go, oh, that's about when the letters jump about. Yeah, maybe for some, not everyone. So dyslexia is related to, so difficulty is lexia, things to do with words, comprehension, reading, decoding, syllabification. See if I can even say that word. So how do we break words down into syllables, understand that, spelling, etc. So lots sits around dyslexia, well, more than I think some of us really appreciate, and same with any of these conditions. Dyscalculia, this is a condition which is related to maths and numbers. So some have no concept of numbers at all, and others might then have, you know, had difficulty with bringing numbers together, with learning how to manage money, with reading timetables, etc. So dyscalculia. Then we've got dyspraxia, or developmental coordination disorder. This is in relation to our fine and or gross motor coordination. So some with dyspraxia might be described as being clumsy because they bump into things, fall over things, knock things over. But it's also about our fine motor coordination. So things like handwriting, holding a pen, painting, doing your shoelaces, those things are tricky for some people. So I'm on a one-woman mission to eradicate these pen passports that come up in schools, whereby kids from primary school have to have beautiful handwriting in order to get the Beryl handwriting pen, right? Some kids are just never going to be able to do that. So it's such an early indication of difference and segregation at school because of a neurodifference, and appreciating that actually there are other ways that you can do that, like being a brilliant touch typer. It does away with the fact that you need to hold a pen, but sometimes our sort of antiquated ways of assuming that this is what we all have to do means that it can be really tricky for some. With ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so this is a condition that affects our brain's management system. So we see traits like having a busy brain. So some people find it really difficult to switch off, and this is where the medication might be useful to help people just to rest their brain and just have time to be able to, get that rest that we all need. Also, so that might mean sleep disturbance. It may mean hyperactivity or fidgeting, or it may not. This hyperactivity is not something that is there for everybody. And similarly with all of these conditions, this isn't you have to have all of these in order to get a diagnosis. We all have different ways in which our brains are working. But ADHD also has things, traits such as emotional dysregulation, but also hyperfocus. Some people with ADHD have to be reminded to take a break, have a drink, eat, because they are so focused on what they're doing that they find it difficult to take themselves out of it. So that's some of the traits with ADHD. And then round to autistic spectrum condition. So this is a condition where we see the world differently to others around us. So it may be that we have different sensory preferences, specific interests. And when I say specific interests, I mean we're going in deep to particular topics of interest. This is where the experts are. This is where you want these brains to really help us to understand what's happening and what needs changing. Pattern recognition is another thing that we see quite commonly. In the middle, in that green circle, I've got some of the strengths that we commonly see across neurodiverse conditions, because as I said, the diagnoses are about deficit models. Are you bad enough, and has it impacted you for long enough and since a child to be diagnosed with this condition? What we don't look at is the other end of the spikes, which are strengths, and we see these in very commonly: analytical skills, resilience, curiosity, creativity, empathy, linking ideas, pattern recognition. So these are common across all of the neurodiverse conditions. And the important thing about this is, billions of neurons connected in billions of different ways. We do not have a brain that is, this is my dyscalculia area, this is my ADHD area, or my autism area is a bit smaller. That's not how our brains work, but that's how the diagnoses are working. Our brains are billions of neurons connected in billions of different ways. And so it means that we have overlap of traits and overlap of conditions, which is the rule rather than the exception. And here we took a cut of the data from the Do It Profiler. We've profiled thousands of people, and this is just one cut, which helps us to see that 80% of those with autism, traits of autism, 80% have developmental coordination disorder or dyspraxia. That's the biggest overlap we see between conditions. A third with dyspraxia have ADHD, a third with ADHD have autism, a fifth with ADHD have tic disorders, which is another bucket term, if you like, which includes Tourette syndrome, but we just assume, I think sometimes when we talk about tics, we get, well, that's Tourette's and that's swearing. It's not. This can be lots of different ways that Tourette's or tic disorders can manifest, as well as the swearing version, which is only affects 10% of those with Tourette syndrome. But a fifth with tic disorders have developmental language disorder. Half with developmental language disorder have dyslexia. Half with dyslexia have dyscalculia. 2 in 5 with dyscalculia have developmental language disorder. And as I said, that's just one cut of the data. We can keep cutting and keep cutting, and I can guarantee that what it's showing us is that we have many traits which may be related to any of the neurodiverse conditions, but what the diagnoses are doing is looking at, do you have this condition? Let's look at the tick list for that condition. Yes, you do. No, you don't. Actually, the majority of people that are going forward for diagnosis will get a diagnosis. So yeah, there's a real importance that as coaches, we are asking, what does this tell me about you? What do I need to know about you? What are your strengths? What are your challenges? And putting that in the context of your coaching conversations, as I'm sure you do, and not being distracted by, I have a diagnosis of this, that means that. So not making assumptions, which I know none of you ever would. The other thing, I touched on this earlier about mental health, is our brain is in charge of all of this, right? So it's not separate to mental health and neurodiversity. These are one brain, billions of neurons, billions of connections. And so what we see is that we see a higher prevalence of mental health challenges for those who are neurodivergent. And dependent, again, on what door you go through, may mean that you end up talking and treating for a mental health condition when actually you should be looking and thinking about, is there something else going on here? So what we commonly see is that people are missing out or misdiagnosed, and we see lots of people who are, who present with particular traits and are misdiagnosed with mental health conditions, given medication, when actually that's not what's going on. So thinking about, understanding that there can be high levels of mental health challenges, and particularly, I didn't pull this out of the last slide, but what we've seen is an increase in the number of women being diagnosed with neurodiverse conditions as they get older. Now, just to give you some context around this, the diagnoses for ADHD and autism were created back in the 80s, and they were created by observing boys. And so what we saw through the 80s into the 90s was a 10-to-1 ratio in relation to autism, 10 boys to every 1 girl being diagnosed with autism. And with ADHD, similar kind of ratios, because the ways in which these traits were playing out in girls were very different to boys. As our research has increased, we know now that the traits are coming out differently in girls, and what we also know is that we girls are very good at masking and camouflaging. And I don't know why that might be. Some theories say that it's because for us girls, it's really important for us to fit in with our peer group. I want to look like them, be like them, talk like them. And that doesn't seem to bother boys as much. And so what it means is that we might mask these traits, and what I commonly hear actually is, oh, my daughter, she goes to school and school tell me she's an absolute angel and she's always putting her hand up and she's really helpful and she's got lots of lovely friends. And then she comes home and she is a horror. And it's like I've got two different, they're talking about a completely different child. And sometimes that could be a real indicator that, she's in her safe space, she's dropped the mask, and now you're getting that version. And this is important, and I'm going to talk about this in the context of your coaching, because, you know, sometimes people can present in different ways. Carol, you've put a comment in there. Thank you. Did you want to say that? Please do. If there's anything, please come off mute and talk to us. That'd be great.
But so I was just laughing at the fact that it never occurred to me that I was ADHD, and that's a whole lot later, but my son was. It just made me laugh. And I'm talking a long time ago, the fact that nobody really knew anything, and everybody was stabbing at, you know, what it might be, and were latching onto, well, he's blonde and blue-eyed, so therefore he's got a much higher chance of being ADHD. And as you were saying, it's yeah, quite bizarre how things are moving on, thankfully, but
yeah, very much so. And you touch on a great point, which is the other thing that we now know is, guess what, this is genetic. You know, we are born with our brilliant brains in the majority of situations. There are some scenarios, I'll just go back to my crazy diagram, sorry to bleed your eyes, but up in the right hand here, you know, we've got things like neglect and abuse, poor schooling, exclusion, being in care, poor housing, etc., poor nutrition. These things can lead to traits that look very similar to neurodiverse conditions and can impact and maybe, you know, cause neurodiverse traits. Similarly, down here I've got TBI, traumatic brain injury. You know, sometimes with traumatic brain injury, again, it can cause or trigger neurodiverse traits. And so sometimes we have to make sure, and diagnosticians certainly have to make sure they're asking questions. Have you ever had a head injury? We've seen a real increase in sports injuries, and lots of research now going on relating to head injury and neurodiversity, and particularly in sports. And you know that some kids are now banned from doing headers until they're a bit older and that type of thing. So, you know, there's lots at play here. It's not just as simple as, oh, you fidget a lot, let's give you that badge. You know, it's that kind of, it's much more complex and important that we are understanding individuals. Prissy, you've got your hands up.
Yeah, here. I was just kind of, sort of emphasised with Carol, because I used to work for a company that made the medication for ADHD. And
oh, really?
Yeah, so we had access then to all the KOLs, the key opinion leaders all over the world, and in North America, Canada, and the States. You know, they're screened for autism or neurodiversity at 4 years old. Medicate them at 6 years old. Wow. And we were doing a lot of education for teachers at the time. And the amount of teachers that didn't believe in ADHD, they said it was bad parenting. It's a myth. Yes. And so a lot of the diagnosis is dependent on observation of them at school.
Yes.
You've got teachers that absolutely believe there's no such thing as ADHD, and I have regular debates with them. It's no wonder so many of them get missed, particularly girls, because of course they're not playing up. But I'm coming across a lot now that I'm helping the 40-year-old women that get missed. I'm helping them get diagnosed because it shows up very clearly. But a lot of them are told it's menopause. Because of their hyper emotional sort of state, and of course they're coming to me because of course they're having meltdowns with their husbands and stuff.
And you know what, who knew women had hormones, you know? And this, what's happening, this is also a great piece of research that's going on in the neurodiversity space, because what happens is at puberty, and then monthly through our cycle, and then at perimenopause into menopause, our estrogen is bumping up against dopamine in such a way which is then heightened at perimenopause to the point where it's just like, you know, I could control it for this part of my life on monthly, even though, you know, it was a bit of a nightmare for a week, a month, or whatever, you know, we're all amongst friends here. But then at menopause, like I don't know what's going on, you know. So we've seen a definite increase in the research that's helping us to understand the impact that hormones have on women in relation to neurodiversity as well, because it's just that, you know, I was able to mask I was coping and now I just can't cope, you know. So it's becoming definitely higher levels of women being diagnosed at that stage of their lives as well. So for you, you're already coaching neurodivergent clients. So some may know about it, others may not. And for you, thinking about neurodiversity, as I said, we're all neurodiverse. Some of us will reach that threshold because 20% of us are neurodivergent. So you already have individuals who are neurodivergent in your coaching clients. And the goal is for you to coach them with more awareness and confidence to think about how to recognize and respond to those different thinking and processing styles. And the key thing here, as I'm sure you are all already very well aware, so apologies for the suck eggs statement, one size never fits all. So flexing your coaching style according to the cognitive style is really important. And what the neurodiversity diagnoses are looking at are executive functioning, so attention, working memory, emotional regulation, processing speed as well, which can differ. And different profiles might prefer verbal or written prompts over purely verbal reaction or reflection, sorry. They might prefer structured questions or scaffolding in order to stay on track. Lots of people want just one question at a time to help them to think, process, come back, rather than, you know, lots of different questions. Extra time maybe to process, or silence, or, you know, time to think through. And also, you know, for you to emphasize curiosity, so asking questions like, what helps you to think best in this space, or invite, you know, that kind of discussion about pace, about note-taking, visual prompts, etc. So lots of different ways that we can think about individual responses and tailoring our coaching according to our requirement. And I mentioned masking and the impact of masking and fatigue and past experience in your coaching means that some of your neurodivergent clients will often arrive with very protective habits that have been born from misunderstanding or exclusion. They've learned how to cope in this world. So masking itself can lead to exhaustion. You know, it's really tiring trying to fit in or behave in a way that is not your normal way of being so that you can fit in with the world around you. So it can be tiring, lead to exhaustion, maybe anxiety, self-doubt. And in your sessions, it might limit some authenticity, you know, for them to be able to, they're well practiced and versed in not talking exactly about how they're feeling or what they're thinking. So, you know, that authenticity, I think, is a really important recognition, and discussing our cognitive and emotional fatigue in processing differences can make intensive dialogue also really draining for some. So, and yeah, I know I'm shattered when I leave my coaching sessions with my amazing coach, which I'm sure you all have a similar impact on your coachees as well. But recognize that their past experiences of being judged or misunderstood can sometimes affect trust and openness when you're in a coaching conversation. So, you know, establishing that trust, I know, is a key part. But thinking about slowing your pace, normalizing rest and pauses, celebrating honesty, and checking in on energy levels as part of your contracting are all suggested tips for taking into account that masking and fatigue. Also, you'll want to create a psychologically safe coaching space. And I know that this is like the buzzword of the moment, isn't it? Psychological safety. But for me, you know, creating that space in which everyone feels safe to talk without having to question themselves or second guess what they're saying, etc., is really important. And that safety will enable insight. So that inclusion begins with having genuine acceptance and flexibility. So thinking about, how, asking the question, how can we make this space best for you? So being explicit about that and offering flexibility in the modes of your coaching. So maybe having cameras off, and apologies, I should have invited you all to do that if you wish during this session, or shorter sessions, or having written reflection, or doing things like we're doing today, record, so that people have got an opportunity to re-watch after the session is finished, can all be really helpful. So the other thing to think about then, or to give you some practical strategies for adapting your approach while staying person-centered. So the key message here is that adaptation enhances the relationship. It doesn't compromise your coaching integrity. You want to create as much of a personalized approach as you can, as good coaches, I'm sure. So in contracting, you can clarify communication preferences, session lengths, and feedback style. In your environment, you can reduce sensory overload, such as lighting, sound, visual, clutter. If you're in person or online, there are lots of ways we can change the view, the format of our screens or whatever, to help people to really feel comfortable. Also, in our structure, we can use visual mapping, recap our key points, share written summaries. As I said, share a video recording of your session maybe as well. In our communication, we can avoid metaphors, so not using heavy or ambiguous language, and check that we've got shared meaning as well for some of the conversations that we have. And in your pacing, build in silence, have time for reflection or asynchronous follow-up. So having email reflections or visual notes can be really helpful. And also having a strengths-based focus, so reframing challenges through the lens of what works really well for that individual. And ultimately, neuro-inclusive coaching practice means partnership, curiosity, and psychological safety. So in closing, I want you to think about the one adjustment you could make tomorrow that might make your coaching more neuro-inclusive. I'm not going to get you to share it now. I'm going to give you time to reflect on that. Be aware that, as you know, awareness is only the start. And I hope what I've done today has given you an increased awareness of neurodiversity. And so what? What next? What does that mean? But also, inclusion grows through continuous learning, humility, and experimentation. We're not going to get it right first time for everybody, because we're all beautifully unique. So how do we create these spaces where everyone's able to really shine? And I'm going to take a deep breath and stop and ask if anybody has any questions. Thank you for your hearts. I like these.
Mel, thank you so much from all of us to start with. Brilliant presentation. And
you're so welcome.
That lovely busy slide,
yes,
with regards to trying to visualize the map of everything, just
yes,
encompasses, I think, the complexity that this is not a one size fit all kind of way of being. And actually, this is the bit that I probably, when I started my journey of understanding what neurodiversity is, the piece is the bit that I really had to learn. And I think so many people think this is linear, like you said. It's not circular, like your diagram. And it's just so often they're associated. Like my daughter was dyscalculia and ADHD. That's what was picked up for her. My husband had depression, diagnosed nearly all of his life, but actually it was ADHD. And it was just wrongly it's all those types of things, and they're such common things you start to learn through your coaching practice now. So it's been a brilliant talk. And Chrissy, I see you've got a question there. If you'd like to go ahead, that'd be brilliant.
Shall I stop sharing the slides and we can talk to each other?
It's less of a question and more of a comment, really, is that, when I talk to my clients, I talk about the superpowers. because there are so many superpowers that the neurodiversity brings. That spiky profile means you're absolutely outstanding at something.
Yeah.
And a lot of my clients are, very, very successful at what they do because of that hyper focus and that creativity or their empathy. So they're really good with people. And dare I say, it's a lot of women that end up in psychotherapy because they become so fascinated with the emotions and watching people that they become curious, and that's another big thing. And the other superpower that I see an awful lot is their thirst for growth and knowledge as well. So that brings them a lot into coaching, psychotherapy, all of our professions. So
it's interesting. It's
so,
interesting. And the superpower narrative is quite an interesting one, Chrissy, because a lot of people don't feel very like they have a superpower. And I think this is where it's important to listen to the individual. And if they are describing themselves as having superpowers, that's great. But a lot of people feel very impaired by some of their neurodiverse traits, and it doesn't feel very much like a superpower. So I think the important thing is hearing, and you're right, of course, we've got our spikes in our profiles. This is not all about deficit. But I think it's taking the lead from the way in which people describe themselves, including superpower from my in my experience. But helping them to identify that this isn't all the deficit. This is about the other end of the spike as well, and where are the brilliance? Because we're all kind of trained, aren't we, to develop, get good at stuff, but actually there's loads of stuff that we're just never going to be great at. And I think that sometimes when we're thinking about strengths and challenges, that's a good way to look at it as well.
And if we focus much more on the positives, then the deficits don't matter so much.
Exactly. Yeah. Hi, Hannah.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it. I even moved my client session back a bit. I managed to get them to, I was like, oh, I'm going to be a bit late.
That's an accolade.
But luckily they're quite flexible, so that's really good. And I'll say to them, I'm applying all my lessons to my client sessions, which is really good. I've absolutely loved it. I'm always one for getting labels or leaving labels at the door. And that's just something that throughout all of my time coaching and counselling and doing everything, I've kind of been trying to leave the labels at the door, and even for myself. So just to be a bit vulnerable and open up here, I've had people say to me, "Are you neurodivergent?" Because I'm so high performing in the work that I do and in sport. Like I excelled in sport. I've got a background in TV and acting and all these different jobs that I've done throughout my life. I used to say short life, but now I'm getting a bit older, so I don't have as many comments there. But I used to have people telling me all the time, "God, you've done so much, or you've achieved so much." I've had several businesses I started my first business when I was a kid, and I've just been really entrepreneurial. So people are always wondering, but I don't have as many of the challenges with it. And I don't know if this is because I'm obsessed with the self-development. So then I counterbalance them and I work on them. So the stress and the negative impact isn't in my life as much. So this conversation has been quite thought-provoking and again, I always come back to, don't label it, Hannah. Don't worry about it. Don't label it.
No.
But it's just been really interesting to look at everything and to hear your perspective on it, and also to hear you say you wouldn't have done the test again if you were given the opportunity to. And yeah, so
I've done the diagnosis for sure.
Yeah, okay. And the test that you mentioned, was that something anybody can access?
Yes, and I'm going to be bold and invite you all to try it. Because I think, as coaches, I think this is a tool that would be super useful to you. So I'm going to, if you would like to, I would give you a complimentary demonstration of the tool, which means sending you all a link so that you can try it, and I'll and then you can let me know what you think. I think you'll find it super useful for your client conversations for sure, and certainly for the two of you, Keely and Paul, for your apprenticeships. I've got a specific apprenticeship version that I can send to you. But and I think that this is the thing, right? I don't go digging for the negatives, Hannah. If you're just brilliant at everything, that's great, right?
That's quite exhausting, though, so it's not always great.
But what the model doesn't do is kind of give you a diagnosis for being brilliant at everything. Right, so we think Einstein was definitely neurodivergent. I worked at Oxford University for 8 years. I was surrounded by brilliant brains, right? You don't get a diagnosis for being brilliant at stuff. You get a diagnosis for struggling with things, which is such a shame. And yet, and again, demonstrates that actually don't be fixated on the label, get to know the person and what their strengths and challenges are. So, but I would love to invite you to all try do it profiler so that you can see it for yourselves and you know, give you a bit of insight into yourselves too.
Well, thank you ever so much, and
Yes,
I'll take it from everybody that it's okay. I'll share your details with Mel. Obviously, they're registered to Business Coach directly, but if everybody's open, I can share the details across to Melanie, of course. Mel, thank you again. And believe it or not, it's over 5 o'clock. The day is an hour. It's just suddenly whipped past. I could listen to this topic and learn so much myself, but that's my brain, how it likes to be stimulated. But I'm just going to give you a bit of insight of what we've got coming up as well in the series moving forward. So our webinar in November is called Beyond the Boardroom, Scaling Your Coaching Impact to Every Level. This will allow people to have an introduction to one of Insight's new tools called Explore. If you're an Insight's discovery practitioner or interested in understanding Insights, they've launched a new tool called Explore, which is very much to support individuals on the front line. So it's very much looking at how we scale it. So if you're really interested in that, please do come along. The registration details have just been put on the Business Coach Directory LinkedIn page, but you will get an email at some point about this. For those of us that are members of the Business Coach Directory, we have our Lunch and Learn community meeting for members only in December. We run this session every other month, and this is very much about facilitation, practitioner, and really bringing that community piece to talk about areas within our coaching business and practice where we might want to get some other opinions with regards to that. If you're curious around that, please just reach out to me. And then finally, the date for our speaker in January is the 13th of January. I'm currently looking for a speaker for that session. So if you're interested in that yourself or know somebody that might be, please do reach out to me as I start to firm up the plans into 2026. But thank you ever so much for attending today as we continue to grow Business Coach Directory as well and create this community. So thank you ever so much, everyone. Thanks again, Melanie, and have a beautiful evening, everyone, when it arrives for you all.
Thanks, everyone.
See you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
See you again.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mel. Appreciate it.
Thank you.